Hey y'all, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming to you with the book Postscript Tag. I was tagged in this tag by Jill from the book Bully. I will link to her version of the tag down below. Essentially, this is just a really great tag to finish the year off on. It's going to cover a lot of different things about our reading year. And Jill, like me, views this as easily the best season to be on BookTube. I love seeing everyone's end-of-year videos. I love seeing the best of, the worst of. And so I really liked this tag because it had some pretty interesting questions about how the year went for you, not only in terms of reading, but also in terms of kind of content creation. I think, as is typical, the last question is the one where you should tag people, but Jill tagged first, so I think I'm also going to do that. At the time of filming this, I've not seen many people do this tag, so I want to go on and tag Shelley Swearingen. I want to tag Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space. I want to tag Kate Howe, and then I want to tag Taking Tea with Catherine, because I just really love this tag, and I think it's going to be very, very different depending on the booktuber. So I'm excited to see what all of y'all say. Let's get into the questions. The first question is the longest book you read this year and the book that took you the longest to finish. When I looked on Goodreads to verify this question, it actually told me War and Peace was the longest book I read this year. That's probably true, but I didn't finish War and Peace, so I'm not sure why. I have it registered on Goodreads as something that I read. So I think, my own calculations, I think the longest book that I read this year was The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens. And it might not really be the case in terms of page count, but I think in terms of actual size of the book, this is the longest book that I read this year, because I think it's deceptive. It's not even 800 pages. I think it's something like 790 pages, but it feels like it is much longer than that. And it is a book that took me quite some time to finish. But I will say, though, this is a book that does not feel like it is very long. Though it did take me some time to read it, I was annotating it. And so I just was really having a good time. And I often feel as though Charles Dickens books, they don't feel as long as they actually are, because you really get invested in the characters and the plot. And this was a really interesting one because this book felt very episodic in nature. And so when you put the book down and you came back into it, whether that was a week later or a day later, you weren't necessarily lost because of the nature of the book and how it was written. So I just really loved this one. This did not feel as though it was the longest book that I read this year, but I think technically it is. The book that took me the longest to finish is Napoleon the Great by Andrew Roberts. I technically started reading this in late November, early December of last year, and I don't think I finished it until April. And so this is one that took me a very, very long time to finish, but I truly enjoyed it. Normally when a book takes me longer than a week or two, I often wonder if I'm just not enjoying it. But this is a case where I really wanted to savor the book, and I enjoyed dragging it out. I enjoyed taking my time with it. This was a really fascinating read. It's a biography of Napoleon, as you might can guess. And this, to me, was really my introduction to Napoleon, and it was amazing. I truly fell in love with him as a historical figure. I based a lot of my reading this year around books that he really enjoyed reading. And so this was just a really fascinating and human biography. Coming from the perspective of someone who knew very, very little about Napoleon prior to reading this, I really found this to be a truly spectacular read, because it wasn't so much about Napoleon as a military leader and Napoleon as the greatest commander ever, though there were definitely parts of the biography where that occurred, but it was almost more about who Napoleon was personally, and that's what's attractive to me in a biography. That's why I read biographies. I'm not really interested in military history. That's why I've always steered clear of Napoleon in the past, and I am really sorry that I did. I truly enjoyed this, and this is a very high recommend from me. I want to say this is one of my favorite books of the year, but I read maybe half of it last year, so I don't think that I can count it. Question number 2 is a book you read this year that was outside your comfort zone. And I'm gonna say that I think I did pretty well with that this year. I think I stepped outside of my comfort zone quite a bit throughout the year, but the book that I chose for this is one that is outside my comfort zone, but that I enjoyed the most. A lot of times I step out of my comfort zone and I realize why I like to stay in it. There tends to be a reason why I don't read a lot of literary fiction, for example, and it's because I just don't really enjoy the genre. But this book proved to me that there can be a book in any particular genre that will probably work for you as a reader. And so this book is In the Woods by Tana French, which is a thriller. Prior to this year, I think I'd read a handful of thrillers in my life, but this book proved to me that there are thrillers out there that I will really enjoy. And this is just a very beautifully written book. My enjoyment of the story comes almost more from her writing style than it did from what actually happened in the book. I've carried on with this series. This is still the best one in the series to me. I really loved this. This was everything that I want in a book, and it was in a thriller. And so I was really excited that I stepped out of my comfort zone here because it really proved to me that there is probably a book in any genre that will work for me. I just have to find it. And through reading this, I have gone on to read many other thrillers, and I have discovered that there are quite a few thrillers out there that I really enjoy. So I'm really grateful that I decided to step out and pick this one up. Question number 3 is, how many books did you reread this year? And I really wanted 2021 to be a year of the reread for me. I set that up in my goals at the beginning of the year because looking back, I realized that I used to be far more of a rereader than I am now. And particularly after coming onto BookTube, rereading feels as though it's kind of pointless because you constantly want to be keeping up with what is new, and it feels like you really shouldn't waste your time rereading anything if people have already heard your opinion about it. But I had a long talk with myself at the end of last year, at the beginning of this year, because I really used to enjoy rereading. Rereading made up a large portion of my reading life prior to BookTube, and particularly in my young life. So I decided to really commit to rereading this year, and so I actually reread 16 books, and I think I probably attempted to reread more than that. I DNF'd quite a few rereads this year, some of them completely unintentionally, some of them just because I wasn't feeling at the time, some of them permanently. And so if I were to count those, I'm really not sure how many books I attempted to reread this year, but 16 I finished. Question number 4 is your favorite reread of the year. And I really loved rereading all of the books, especially ones where my opinion was reinforced and also where my opinion was changed. And so I really wanted, going into my year of a reread, I wanted to reread books that I knew I loved, but I also wanted to reread a few books that I was on the fence about or that I really didn't enjoy the first time through, but that I feel sure I should really love. One of my favorite rereading experiences this year was rereading Interview with the Vampire, which I would consider to be my favorite book of all time. And I have a vlog centered around that reread. That was a really rewarding time. And that is the book that I have reread the most. So that was a really exciting one. Another of my absolute favorite rereads of the year was rereading the Grisha trilogy with Svea. And I actually reread the entire Grishaverse with her, and I think the entire experience was just really, really fun because we were constantly bouncing ideas off of each other, and it was a reread for us both after years of not having read the books. And I think we both went into it very skeptical, wondering if we had outgrown the Grisha trilogy in particular, and it was just such a wonderful experience because I loved the books even more the second time through, the Grisha trilogy. Though interestingly, Six of Crows fell quite a bit for me on a reread, but the Grisha trilogy is still absolutely amazing to me. And so this was a really wonderful rereading experience, and I think it was just fun because I did it with Svea and we became really close that way, and I just loved talking to her about it. It was fun to go through a reread with somebody else. So this is definitely one of my favorite rereads of the year. But perhaps my favorite reread experience this year was rereading a book that I hated the first time I read it, and that was The Secret History. The first time I read The Secret History, I thought it was truly awful. I did not understand what people were talking about. I did not understand why it was recommended. I thought it was truly just a terrible book. And then I chose to reread it because a lot of people, since I have gotten onto BookTube, have recommended The Secret History to me as something they think I would enjoy. And I think clearly there's a reason for that. So I decided to reread it because I really felt as though it is a book that I should love. Second time through, I absolutely adored it, and I gave it 5 stars. I really am shocked. It went from a 2-star read for me to a 5-star read, and so that's the power of a reread. Rereading a book at a different time in your life can cause you to have an entirely different perspective on it, in my opinion, and I'm really glad that I chose to reread this one. I think probably in the end, this is the best rereading experience that I had this year because it truly changed my opinion of the book. So it was just a really interesting reading experience, and it's one I'm super glad that I decided to reread. Question number 5 is a book you read for the first time that you look forward to rereading in the future. For me, that is The Marble Fawn by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This book completely and utterly blew me away. And yes, it is definitely going to be on my top books of the year. This is a classic from the 19th century, written by an American author. Historically, American classics and I don't tend to get along. And so I was really shocked that this one floored me the way that it did, but it took place in Rome. It was essentially about art. It was just one of the most beautifully written books I have ever read in my life. I was so stunned reading it that I really almost have no memory of what the plot was. I just was blown away by the writing. And so automatically upon finishing it, I really wanted to start it again and reread it. And I think that I probably will do that in the new year because I just was floored by this. This book is just a stunning piece of literature to me, and I truly am blown away by the fact that this came from one person's mind. One man sat down and wrote this. I mean, it's truly some of the most beautiful writing that you will ever read. It's just really dreamy. And so I'm really looking forward to rereading this. I think it's probably going to happen pretty soon. Number 6 is your favorite single short story or novella that you read this year. Say it with me. First Love by Ivan Turgenev. Wow. I listened to this on audiobook, and I think there was something to that format that really helped the story out that I think really lended itself very well to the story that First Love was telling, which was very dreamy and almost folktale-like, and so I think it helped it to have been read aloud. I went into this with next to no expectations, and I was truly, once again, blown away. So this is another one that I highly recommend. It is more of a novella than a short story, I guess, and thus you spend a little bit more time with the characters and in the world, and I think that really just gives this a sucker punch vibe because the last line, the last paragraph was so strong and so impactful. It really just felt like a gut punch of emotion. It's really shocking to me that so much was packed into such a short story. Number 7 is Mass Appeal, a book you liked and would recommend to a wide variety of readers. For me, that is The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. So this is now considered an Italian classic, but it was published fairly recently, in the past few decades anyway. And this is technically kind of a mystery novel that is set in a medieval monastery. And so I think it has a lot going for it for people who really enjoy a mystery and who like a really compelling plot, but it also kind of has an underlying theme of dark academia and the value of knowledge, the value of reading. And so if you're into that kind of aesthetic, I think this is a really great one. It's also a really beautifully written book. And so if you're someone who really enjoys prose, I think you can get a lot out of this. I think the themes are really excellent. It's also historical fiction, if you love historical fiction like I do. And so I think this one ticks a whole lot of boxes, and I would very easily recommend this to a lot of people. Number 8 is Specialized Appeal, a book you liked but would be hesitant to recommend to just anyone. My answer to this question is potentially my favorite book of the year, but I know this is a book that a lot of people hate and that a lot of people struggled with, and I completely understand why. That is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I was completely swept away by this, and I didn't expect to be. Part of me thought that I probably would really like it because I love nautical stories. I love the ocean, I love the sea, and I love ships. I really love things set on ships. And so I think I knew there were going to be parts of this that really appealed to me, but I did not know that I was going to become obsessed with it. There were parts of it that genuinely almost made me cry. It was so beautifully written. Once again, another 19th century American classic on my tops of the year. I can't believe it. Who am I? I'm finally reading American classics. But this one is just very, very special. I can understand why, though, this one has a bad rap, because I think it is sold as something that it is not, and I think people go into this expecting to be bored, and I don't necessarily think the book is boring. But I also don't necessarily think the book is about Moby Dick in particular, or about kind of the vendetta that the crew have against Moby Dick, that Captain Ahab has against Moby Dick. I think we think this book is something other than what it is. And this book is essentially just about whales. It is about whaling, because in a weird way, Herman Melville knew this was a way of life that was dying out. And so I think partially this book is an ode to whaling itself as an industry that he knew was kind of passing away. And so there are parts of this that I think will really, really make people struggle, particularly if you were not at all interested in kind of nautical terms, because he really throws you in at the deep end. But I really like ships. I really like whales. I found the whaling industry to be very, very interesting. And this was such an interesting critique of whaling as well, because the respect that Herman Melville showed to the whales was just really impactful to me. So this book was a lot of different things that I love. The characters were really strong, but this is one that has a very bad reputation, a very poor reputation. I think it's one that a lot of people were forced to read in school. I'm shocked it was never assigned to me, and I wish it had been. I think this would have been a really spectacular book to read with other people, but I do understand why people don't like this, and I understand totally why people DNF it or struggle with it or rate it 1 star. So this one is definitely specialized appeal. Question number 9, the last question, is to reflect on your year as a bookish content creator. Goals met, good and bad memories, favorite videos you made, etc. First off, I just really want to say thank you for being here. I remember the days when I started my channel. It was almost 4 years ago now, and the idea of getting to 100 subscribers was very daunting to me. And some of you were probably here then. Some of you are originals, and maybe you remember it took me a very long time to reach the 100 subscriber mark, the 200 subscriber mark. And there were certainly times when I thought I'll never even make it to 1,000. And so to be here now with over 4,000 of you is just absolutely incredible. And this channel has been a complete refuge for me in the past 2 years. I know we've all had a really hard couple of years, and this has been a really positive place and community for me. And so just thank you for being here. But looking back on my goals, were they successful? No. I will say I do feel good about rereading. That was one of the questions here. I did really want to make this a year of rereading. That happened. I definitely think that I achieved that, and I really enjoyed it so much that I really want to continue to make rereading a large part of my reading life. And so going into the new year, that's going to continue to be a goal for me. But another of my goals was to read like Napoleon. I think I did this very well in the first 6 months of the year. But after that, it completely took a back seat. And in fact, really in truth, my reading in the second half of the year has been just a complete roller coaster, and it has not gone along with any of my goals. I also set goals halfway through the year that I never even attempted. And many of those were goals that I knew I would roll over into the new year, but I essentially never even tried to attempt any of those goals. There were other goals that I set at the beginning of the year that I'm not even halfway through. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, goals are more guidelines than actual rules to me. To quote Pirates of the Caribbean, I don't feel married to my goals. If my goals help me to pick up a book that was just straggling on my shelf that I was probably not going to be compelled to read otherwise, then they were a success. Whether I read 1 book because of that goal or whether I read 10, I consider the goals a success. I really set goals just to have fun, and if they help me read books that I wouldn't have read otherwise, then that's great. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. Whether I feel as though they were achieved or not. But Reading Like Napoleon is something that I did very, very well in the first 6 months of the year, and I'm gonna do a video wrapping that up because I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed spending time with Napoleon, and that was a project that I loved so much in just those first 6 months of the year that I really feel compelled to continue on with that one as well, and to maybe choose other historical figures to kind of bond with over a year in terms of reading. My favorite videos I made, I really think I'm very fond of my individual vlogs that I made for certain books, because I have a vlog around Dante's Inferno, which I love and I'm really proud of. I have a vlog that was around reading Napoleon's favorite books that I'm also really fond of. And I also have my reading vlog on Interview with the Vampire. And there's something about doing something specific or doing a themed reading vlog that I find really fun. I've discovered this year that vlogging is something that I really, really enjoy doing, because even when I don't necessarily feel like putting myself together and sitting down and filming, I do tend to feel as though, oh, I can film a clip for a vlog. And so I really enjoy watching other booktubers' vlogs, and I have really enjoyed vlogging this year. I had many, many goals in terms of videos that I wanted to film this year that didn't get done. I wanted to continue on quite a bit with my Renaissance recommendations. I wanted to do a video specifically on famous classics from the Italian Renaissance, and I still would like to do that. I didn't carry on with any of my Vikings recommendations except at the beginning of the year, and I had big plans about that, a saga video. I was gonna kind of dissect Vikings as a TV show and all of the historical inaccuracies and parts of it, and then I think I was just gonna kind of wrap up all of my Viking reading for the year, and maybe I'll still do that. But there were certainly individual videos within series that I have that I wanted to do that I didn't do. And like I said, many of my goals halfway through the year that I didn't even attempt, I was really excited about. I wanted to do like a French Revolution type series, reading books on the French Revolution, set in the French Revolution, and I still am pumped about that. I also wanted to do something similar with the Russian Revolution, and I'm still very interested in that. I think I just need to tell myself that any series that I want to do is probably longer form than what I initially intended to be. I'm looking forward to what 2022 has to bring in terms of reading and in terms of booktube. This has been a fairly great reading year for me, so I hope that 2022 is another really awesome one. But that's going to be all for me today. I hope you're all having a great week. Happy reading. Goodbye.